This is a presentation of SBE 15, New York City.
All right. So without further ado, I'd like to present our presenter for the evening, Lynn Claudy, NAB Senior VP of Technology. Thank you for being here, Lynn.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And I think Conrad Troutman asked me to do this. It was a year ago. He said, "How about doing this in September next year?" And so that's how we worked that out. It's definitely a pleasure to talk to you all today. I apologize to Jeff, but I'm going to apologize to you in advance because I'm at my daughter's house. She has two young kids, and this is kind of an open plan house, so it's possible one of them will escape up here. So if you hear young kids under the age of 4, you'll forgive me or forgive them. But my plan is to, I know there are radio people on here, but apparently you're interested in TV too, which is great because I'm going to talk about ATSC 3.0 and the transition that is ongoing now, has been going on for a while, and at least my best guess as to where we're at, and maybe some editorializing on where we're going. So very relevant to New York City as things ramp up there, hopefully in the next period. So this is ATSC 3.0, also known as Next Gen TV. Next Gen TV is just what it's called for the consumer population, to give them something where they don't have to memorize acronyms and numbers and decimal points and things like that. So engineers all talk about ATSC 3.0. Consumers and marketers and television set manufacturers all talk about Next Gen TV, but it's the same basic thing. And it's all about over the air, the original over the air broadcasting system and how it's changing. And the first question that always comes up with other groups, not this group, but other groups, is over the air still a relevant thing? Are we doing that? Or I thought TV was all over the internet. If you're under the age of 30, you probably believe that. And so we have to defend broadcasting sometimes as being still relevant. And the numbers help us do that because it is still relevant. Nationally, about 18% of Americans live in households that own an over-the-air antenna for watching TV. And that surprises a lot of people, especially, if you're an urban dweller in New York. Kind of the statistics are a lot lower. But you go out to smaller towns, smaller cities, rural populations, and the only way people get television is over the air. Surprisingly, antenna viewing is as much, if not more, a young generation thing than it is an older generation thing, because the younger population is more mobile. They move around a lot. They don't want to be paying a cable bill, and or they don't have as much money. So over the air sounds very good to them. They can carry their antenna with them when they move. And just in 2 years, antenna ownership, at least according to this study from Horowitz Research, antenna ownership grew from 14% of that population, 18 to 49, up to 23% in 2022, which is quite a big jump. Other ways of looking at that is instead of the average, you look at some of these cities where they have a much higher than average instance of over-the-air viewing. So Phoenix, 27%, Minneapolis, St. Paul, 26%, on down to Dallas at 25%, and the numbers go down from there. But even in urban settings, especially with large Hispanic populations or other minorities, over-the-air viewership is very high. So be loud and proud, over-the-air is still relevant for TV. We all know it, but sometimes we have to tell other people about it. current snapshot of next-gen TV markets. There are 70 cities or Nielsen markets on the air now with next-gen TV. This is a map of the DMAs, so it's not really, it's a little bit misleading because these are the DMAs in which there are over-the-air broadcasts in that DMA. It doesn't mean that you necessarily distribute signals throughout the entire DMA, but these are the Nielsen markets where there are ATSC3 broadcasts. There's a total of 379 channels right now, unless something's changed in the last couple of days. There are 89 host stations, so that means there's a lot of markets where there's more than one host station, which is a good thing because all the broadcasters have to share those host stations for their ATSC3 transmission. And right now, market coverage of the US TV households, you have to be careful when you say this, there's 65% of the population lives in markets where there is at least one ATSC3 station on the air from a full power station. And the way things are going, the 2023 goal is to increase that percentage from 65% up to about 75% this by the end of this year. So these are the markets that are on there, and can put a little bit of granularity to them. In markets 1 to 10, 8 of the 10 markets are on the air. The only two outstanding are, of course, New York and Chicago, both of which are hopefully going on the air this year. You probably know a lot more about that than I do. We just read the trades and get a little bit of information there. And if you look at markets 11 to 20, then the situation is even better. You have 9 of those 10 markets are on the air. Only Cleveland is not on the air currently. So 65% now, 75% is the goal. If we get New York on the air, that's 6.2% of TV households in the US by itself. So New York goes on the air, and we're edging up on that 75% goal. That seems to be a number that is very important to the receiver community. Those that have hung back in terms of manufacturing say, well, if you had more than 75% of the markets on the air, then we would think a lot harder about offering a next-gen TV product. So we think we're going to meet that metric this year, and that would be a good thing. So next-gen TV has a logo, and that is what consumers see when they're buying a set. We tell them to look for the next-gen TV logo, and that way they know they're buying a television set that can receive ATSC 3.0 signals, which is what we want them to do. But unfortunately, there are sets out there that don't receive ATSC 3.0, and you kind of have to figure that out. So that is a logo, and it does have a certification program behind it that kind of guarantees certain performance metrics are met by the TV. The Consumer Technology Association, along with NAB, fund this logo program. It's implemented by a testing contractor, Resilient, based in the UK, used to be known as Eurofins Digital Testing. And if you want to get the logo to put on your product, on your packaging, or in your marketing material as a manufacturer, you have to go through this certification process where you get a suite of tests, performance tests, that your test has to pass in order to use the logo. And then you sign a certification statement that you passed these tests. Currently, there are 209 of those tests. I think we started out with about 100 tests, and every year they keep going up. So we expand the coverage of what's in the standard on an annual basis, actually on a semi-annual basis. The version of the test suite that will be used for 2024 sets just launched at the end of June, and then there will be a maintenance release at the end of September. But that will be because television set manufacturers start locking down what they're going to do next year in about the middle of the year previous. So this 2023 version 1.0 is actually the test suite that is be used for 2024 model sets. And as I said, it's continuously developed and expanded. It is impossible to cover every contingency of what you might be sending and what a receiver might experience. There are something like 10,000 combinations just of modulation and coding in the standard. So this has to be done by intelligent sampling of the kind of modes that you can be in and the type of signals that you're going to be transmitting. And over time, you increase that in a way that makes sense that these are likely combinations you're going to see in the field. So that CTA logo program is out there. In terms of who is participating in the program, right now, it is 4 manufacturers: Hisense, LG, Samsung, and Sony. And yay for Sony, because all their models of television sets are ATSC 3 capable. The other manufacturers, that's not quite true. I'll give you a little bit of insight. I am shocked that this hasn't hit the trade press yet, but it's going to. LG Electronics, because of a patent dispute with a, maybe it has hit the trades today or yesterday, I haven't looked, but they're having a dispute with a patent owner that says they're infringing on their patent, and they won a judgment in June. This company won a judgment against LG Electronics, and it imposes a rather unreasonable fee on each television set that LG Electronics produces. So I suppose out of an abundance of caution, LG Electronics has said, and this was in a filing to the SEC, so it's public knowledge. I don't know why I haven't seen it spread across headlines. LG will not be putting ATSC 3 in any of their sets in 2024. So the other sets that they've already produced are going to be out there, but they are, for the time, putting ATSC 3 on hold until this patent dispute is solved. This is not a Chicken Little, the sky is falling kind of thing. Patent disputes are, if not an everyday occurrence, at least a normal thing to uncover. It's actually a good thing if you think about it, because people are trying to get paid for a product where they see millions of these things coming into the marketplace and think they have something that deserves payment. And that's what the courts are for, and that's what the marketplace is for. So those that are involved with this, that have any kind of insight into it, have told us, don't worry about this. This is the marketplace at work. There is no reason to suspect that ATSC 3.0 is going to go away because of a patent dispute over a not reasonable and non-discriminatory patent holder. These things have a way of working themselves out, but it's a little hiccup that is happening right now. So that's on the bad side. The good side is that there will be new brand names at the 2024 CES in Consumer Electronics Show in January in Las Vegas that will be coming out with support for ATSC 3.0. So LG kind of taking a step back or dwelling a bit, but other manufacturers are going to be coming forward, and the number of sets in the market will significantly go up in 2024, and that's a good thing. The other thing that you are hearing about in the trade press right now is the Next Gen TV logo and whether or not it covers digital rights management, the so-called A3SA, the ATSC 3 Security Authority certification. And this is kind of a matter of history of the way things worked out, that the Next Gen TV logo that certifies the television set performs properly does not include tests about digital rights management or security in any way. And that's because the A3SA formed separately from the logo certification program. they're kind of late to the party, and only recently have broadcasters started to incorporate digital rights management, security, and privacy on their broadcasts. So this security authority was formed about 4 years ago. It is formed by the networks primarily, CBS, ABC, Fox, NBC, Televisa, Univision, and Pearl TV. And they have their own certification program right now, and it covers signal signing, app signing. These are cryptographic signing that makes it clear that the signals are coming from the broadcaster that says they're coming from them, so you can't have a man-in-the-middle kind of attack. And especially with apps that someone couldn't somehow on the broadband side bring in apps that are not the apps intended by the broadcaster, and then content encryption for the main channel programming. So the way this works right now is that CTA did everything that they could short of requiring A3SA certification in order to get the NextGen TV logo. When you get a NextGen TV logo, you have to acknowledge that you've read a statement that says that you understand that broadcasts may be encrypted using A3SA encryption. Here's their phone number, here's their website, here's their email address. And you must certify that you have contacted A3SA about getting the appropriate certification from A3SA. Now, both these programs are run under the auspices of Resilient. It's the same test developer and test implementer. It does not make logical sense that these would be two different programs, but as I said, because of history, currently they are. But there are high-level discussions ongoing now. We expect these programs are going to unite one way or another, and relatively soon. And the reason for that is that we don't want anybody to buy a set that says it's NextGen TV certified, which is supposed to give you a warm and fuzzy feeling that it works, and then you find out it's not A3SA certified, and it doesn't work. So a consumer could care less what A3SA stands for. They just want to have one logo that says, if it's NextGen TV certified, it's kind of a guarantee that this is going to be a good product with the new service that's coming out. So that's kind of in the wings, but talks are happening to make sure that happens, because encryption is definitely rolling out. In 41 of those 70 markets that are on the air, 41 of them have at least one network program that is being encrypted. So it's not just over in, there's one experimental station in a market nobody cares about that's rolling this out. This is in in major top 10 markets and throughout the ATSC 3 community. So no doubt it's going to increase more and more and more, not less and less and less. One of the things that people worry about, and if you look on things like the AVS forum and some of the other consumer forums especially for the third-party device manufacturers, they are worried about three things. They say, well, broadcasters are doing encryption because they're going to limit whether we can make copies of programs, which of course we can do now on a digital video recorder. And even if they let us record things, they're going to put a time limit on that and then erase them from our digital video recorder. And they're not going to let us pause. They're not going to let us rewind. We're not going to let us fast forward to go past ads and that sort of thing. So that's what consumers think is going to happen, which is the paranoid view. The A3SA approved set of encoding rules, which is how these things are being implemented, guarantee that viewers will be able to make as many copies as they want of over-the-air broadcasts. They will not have any retention limits on them. And you will be able to do pause, rewind, fast forward, and ad skipping. And this is a slide from A3SA that was given in a actually it was to an NAB committee, to our TV technology committee, but they've been upfront about this, that there are not going to be onerous rules imposed. The main reason for encrypting is that you prevent indiscriminate retransmission over the internet of copyrighted material. So that this is the networks trying to say, look, we're making this available for over-the-air broadcast. We're not making it available for somebody's website to rebroadcast and charge money for instance. So that's kind of where A3SA is at. I mentioned accessory devices. There are the TV sets, and then there are the accessory devices. The easiest way to get next-gen TV is buy a new TV set that has next-gen TV in it. But there are about a handful of manufacturers that make an appliance you can plug into your existing HD TV, or especially to a 4K set, so that you can get next-gen TV broadcasts. The newest one is from a company called ADTH, no one's ever heard of, that is working with Tolka. That's a software developer that has an ATSC 3 stack that they developed. And they produced this next-gen TV box. It was announced at the NAB show in April, and they started shipping I think in July. And they do have next-gen TV certification, and they do have A3SA certification. And if you bought one of these, you should have received it by now. We bought one at NAB, hooked it up, works fine. And we do have one encrypted channel. I think NBC in Washington, D.C. is encrypted, and it works great. Another one coming out shortly is Zinwell. Zinwell just did a press release maybe a month ago that they were announcing their device. It also is next-gen TV certified and A3SA certified. They have said probably early October for their shipping date. They are not available yet in retail outlets, but they will be. Third one, a device that's pretty familiar to a lot of people, the Zapper box, because they've had a ATSC 1 device available for quite a while. But their Zapper box M1 is next-gen certified, and they are doing things kind of in waves. So they are going to incorporate A3SA DRM certification this month, at least according to their release notes on their website. And they are shipping the unit, but they will be adapting to digital rights management by software updates, as opposed to because they've already shipped units, and they will not require a new unit. They will just require a firmware update. The other one that's out there that's been there for a while is Silicon Dust's HD Home Run, the Flex 4K, and they have a perspective product called Scribe 4K, which will be the DVR. That is next-gen certified now, but it is not A3SA certified yet. And this is kind of a different product because it doesn't have an HDMI cable coming out of it. It works over either Ethernet connection into a home network or a Wi-Fi connection. So it's a so-called gateway device. So you watch TV on either a smart TV through an app or on your iPhone or your Android phone or tablet, and you have to have the app that goes along with that end device. And so that's a little bit tougher for the encryption people. And they proposed one way of doing that, and it turned out that encryption method just didn't get any popularity in the manufacturing market, in the system on chip implementations. So they've had to switch to a different encryption algorithm for sending things over Wi-Fi on a gateway to connected devices. and that will be rolling out in a phased way. So it'll be, I think, Roku devices first, and then smart TVs. And they have if you look at their website, or at least under the discussion forums, they have the plan for how they're going to roll that out. And I'm not sure that there's a specific date on there, but again, that will be rolling out in software firmware updates. But the fact that it hasn't rolled out yet and people have these things has caused a certain amount of panic in the hobbyist consumer community, because they shelled out a couple $100 for this device, and then DRM broadcasts began in their market, and they said, and now it doesn't work, and I don't think it's ever going to work, but it will. So, prices on these things kind of vary. The ATH is the cheapest box. It's under $100. I'm not sure where Zenwell is going to be at. BitRouter is around $200, and Silicon Dust is around $250 right now. And as they add a DVR, and you can add storage to it, anything that has DVR, you need to add storage, and that costs money. So those are the accessory devices that are coming out there imminently. There will be more. In fact, I think they're going to be at the I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's like Pen 3 or PenCom or something that happens in New York. You guys should know about it. There's a consumer show either in September or October that some consumer manufacturers are going to put out some of these accessory devices. And then, of course, CES will be the bigger rollout and the much bigger stage for this to happen. So the cautionary note on all this is that any of these devices, they currently have frequent firmware updates, like every week or every other week, because they're fixing bugs on these things. And that causes a little consternation, because what is free TV? Free TV is supposed to be free. You don't have to have internet, because you have to pay for internet, right? But these devices really require you right now to have an internet connection, or you can go through a process where they mail you a USB stick, but no one wants to go through that. So in essence, accessory devices right now, they work with free over-the-air television, but they need an internet connection because of this update thing while they fix bugs. And it's not so unusual. Any app developer is always updating things, and they update them over the internet. So it is kind of just a uncomfortable fact of life now that for an accessory device, they are updating over the internet. It's also true that the TV sets are updating fairly frequently, and they are updating over the internet as well. So it's maybe a little bit awkward to say, yeah, you don't need anything except an antenna and a 110 volt outlet to get next gen TV. That's true, but most of these things are, they're not quite baked yet, so they're updating every once in a while. I wanted to make sure that you all know what A3SA means to you. The A3SA.com website is where you have to go to get A3SA certified. Signal signing and app signing, cryptographic signing, are required in the ATSC 3 standard. They haven't been implemented generally by everyone, but they are in all the sets. And even though they're not on by default, people are getting, as broadcasters start doing signal signing and app signing, you can get a notice on your set that says you've got something cryptographically signed, and I don't have that feature turned on, so people have to turn it on. But there's a whole, we're in the sunrise period for that, and there will be a high noon, so-called, probably in 2024 or 2025, where eventually sets are going to reject signals that are not signed. This is the low-level signaling of the ATSC 3 signal and signing of broadcast apps. There's going to come a day when sets are going to reject things that aren't signed. So you have to go through this process. And that's something that the host station has to do. It's not each individual broadcaster, it is the host station that has to contract with A3SA's certification for signal signing and app signing. And there's a fee for doing that, and they lay all that out on the website. It's not very onerous. Content encryption, on the other hand, is an optional feature in the ATSC 3 standard. You can encrypt content, and if you're a network, you want to encrypt content, but you don't have to. So that's on a broadcaster by broadcaster basis. You go through a separate procedure with A3SA and their certification contractor, which is EONTI, EONTI. And there's a flow chart for how you go through those things. So I'm not going to bore you with the details, and they're, kind of a little bit daunting at first blush, but they have this stuff laid out pretty well about how you have to go through this. So that's A3SA and how to get through it. As far as sets themselves and what the projected sales forecasts are for now, these are the current numbers that are done every 6 months by the Consumer Technology Association. So this was July of 2023. And it shows that they will sell about, when all is said and done, this year, a little less than 4 million sets. And if you look at the cumulative total, that means there'll be about 10 million sets in the market by the end of this year. And things start ramping up quite a bit in 2025. So it goes from 4 million sales to 6 million, and then to 12 and 27, 31, 35. So in 2025, if this projection is correct, that's about a third of all TV shipments, 12 million. There's by and large, a little less than 40 million TV sets that sell every year. And they are also starting to track these accessory devices, next-gen TV converters, which are popular right now in the home, the hobbyist crowd. But the real game is in television sets. The numbers in television sets dwarf the converter box sales by orders of magnitude. So while everyone's talking about the accessory devices and what they do and they don't do, it's really about television sets. And television sets, they have no problem with DRM because they've already got it in there for Netflix and other internet services, and they go through the next gen TV certification program easily. If you have been looking at projected sales of next gen TV sets, you'll notice that this curve is not as optimistic as previous curves. And so this is a comparison between the July 23 forecast and the January 23 forecast, when things look a little bit rosier. The upshot of it is, so the recent numbers, the July numbers are in green, and the January numbers are in blue. So there was originally expectations that next year would kind of be the inflection point, the knee of the hockey stick curve that consumer products go through if they're going to be successful. And it was expected that would be in 2024. So we'd go from 5 million sales to 12 million and then ramp up very quickly from there. And at least CTA is saying, no, there's a softening in the market. There was over sales of TVs during COVID because everyone was watching TV because they couldn't go outside. And that kind of leveled off now, and there's a return to rationality. So overall sets of TVs are down somewhat, and not all the brands that were expected to come in did come in. So they're saying this means there's an inflection point shift of about a year to get the higher level of sales for next gen TV sets up to where you really start talking about it being a mainstream thing. We're still in the early part of the consumer transition here in buying television sets. As far as regulations on broadcasters, there are a few, as you probably know, but the only one I wanted to talk about it is the simulcast requirement, because that's what's holding us back in terms of broadcasters being able to offer a compelling service. So right now, broadcasters can transmit in ATSC3, but if you're going to transmit in ATSC3, you must have someone else in the market simulcast what you're putting on that ATSC3 channel onto an ATSC1 channel. So it's simulcasting of your primary program in ATSC3 must also be replicated somewhere on someone else's ATSC1 stick. And that simulcast must be substantially similar to ATSC3. So it can be in 4K and it can be, a different camera angle perhaps, but it has to be the same basic programming. And that was in place from the beginning of when ATSC3 was authorized, but it had a fuse on it that ran out in the spring of this year. And the rulemaking in the report and order that came out in June, that simulcast requirement was extended, but it was only extended until July of 2027. So that's 4 years. That's 4 years for us to prove that you don't need to simulcast what's in ATSC3 on ATSC1 in order to protect consumers. In other words, get your set sales up and get the accessory device sales up and be able to do ATSC3 as a standalone service that doesn't have to be replicated in ATSC1. And the reason that's important is because we just don't have a lot of spectrum to work with here. This is not like the DTV transition where we had over 400 megahertz and everyone got 2 6 megahertz channels, one for analog and one for digital, and we ran them simultaneously until you could turn off the analog one. We've only got 210 megahertz because of the several auctions that have taken place, channels 2 to 36. And we got to put ATSC1 and ATSC3 in that spectrum. And we haven't lost any broadcasters. We've still got 1,700 odd broadcasters in the country. So we've got less than half or about half the spectrum, same number of broadcasters. And that's a problem. So we scream at the manufacturers saying, we need more sets in the market. And they scream at us saying, we need more broadcasts. And the fact is, we can get more markets on the air, but each market that's on the air is sharing with a bunch of ATSC3 broadcasters. And, the headline here is true. ATSC3 doesn't flourish until ATSC1 is turned off. Give you an example of that. You take a market with 6 stations and each one of them has an HD and they have 3 SDs. And if you mix and match those things in a spaghetti-like way, you can free up about 2 stations of those 6 that then could do ATSC3. But those 2 stations have to have the ATSC3 signals of all 6. So you're only getting about a third of a channel to be able to do ATSC3. Now, best case, if you're using MPEG-2 for the main channel and for the diginets. Now, it's possible that you can use MPEG-4 compression. You are allowed to do that for diginets. And MPEG-4 instead of MPEG-2 is about a 2-to-1 advantage. Most smart TVs, in fact, I haven't seen any at least in the past 10 years or so, that can't do MPEG-4 because they put MPEG-4 in there because of streaming. The FCC says you have to use MPEG-2 for your primary signal, but you can do anything you want on MPEG on the diginet side. So ATSC has kind of gotten their act together and figured out a better way to document using MPEG-4 It doesn't say whether it's for a primary signal or a diginet, but it's a good roadmap for manufacturers to say, if you comply with the ATSC standard, you can put MPEG-4, you know that it's going to work. And in fact, there's about a dozen or so stations around the country that have at least one diginet doing MPEG-4. We've got one in Washington, D.C., the Unimos station is an MPEG-4, and it looks really good. And also MPEG-2 encoders just by themselves, statistical multiplexing has come a long way, so you can pack a lot more stuff into the 6 megahertz channel than you used to be able to do. So if you did that in in that hypothetical case, and you said, well, I'm going to use MPEG-4 compression for all the diginets, you can, in that 6-station example, you can get another station out of it. So you can get 3 stations in ATSC3 to share among those 6 ATSC3 signals. So now you're operating at 50% capacity. So you're still not, what you want is to have everybody able to do their own ATSC3 in their own 6 megahertz channel. And that's just not going to happen as long as we have to simulcast ATSC1. So we have this boat anchor on both manufacturers and broadcasters that is ATSC1 spectrum, and the regulations that go along with it put a limit on what you can do as an ATSC3 broadcaster. So what does it take to get rid of ATSC1? Well, that's a good question for the FCC, but you can certainly say, if you want to get rid of ATSC1, you're going to have pretty much all new sets getting ATSC3 capability, and you need a robust market of inexpensive converter boxes and dongles. And I don't know how you define inexpensive, but it's certainly something, under $100, maybe under $50. So you need that. And then you got to deal with, well, what about all the people that didn't buy a new TV set and don't want to spend money on inexpensive converter boxes? How do you make the transition for them? And that's really a question for the FCC. And there was no way of talking to the FCC about this because they didn't have anything going on with it in early 2023. And NAB suggested to them, look, you need to start thinking about these things, about what is the plan for turning off ATSC1 or dealing with the transition market by market, or do we have a adoption rate that is a national deadline date, or do we have a adoption rate for television sets that when each market individually reaches them, they can transition? None of that was being talked about. And we had told the FCC, you need to start worrying about these things, and it'll take you a couple of years to get through this. So at the NAB show on April 17th, the FCC chairwoman, Jessica Rosenworcel, announced a public-private initiative to do this called the Future of TV Initiative. And this is run by NAB. NAB chairs the working groups, and a list of participants was put together that was approved by the FCC. And there are 3 working groups. Each of them has about 36 participants in it. And there are about 20 organizations, companies or organizations involved that sit on these 3 working groups. And they are basically on backwards compatibility in working group 1 and completing the transition in working group 2 and post-transition regulation in working group 3. So just to put a little bit of color on that, the backwards compatibility group is how do you minimize negative consumer impact of ATSC 3 transmissions? How do you make sure that consumers don't get shortchanged by more bandwidth going to ATSC 3 to ATSC 1? What is the availability and the pricing of consumer equipment? What's a good threshold for saying that's compatible and is okay? what kind of consumer education should be done and by whom and how often. So there's those sorts of things. Working group 2, there's kind of some overlap here, but this is a talk about how do you end the simulcasting regime, or can you? How do you manage the capacity between ATSC 1 and ATSC 3? How many bits go to each one as more stations transition? And how do you make sure that there are standards for retailing and manufacturing and labeling stuff? And then finally, working group 3 is once ATSC 1 is either gone or mostly gone, maybe you have a night light station where you have all the stations in the market with a bit reduced and resolution reduced version of their signal. But does ATSC 1 broadcasting event eventually end? And if it does, how do you have carriage regulations for 3.0 signals on cable and satellite and so forth? And is there anything we have to do for the accessible community that we don't do now? And what about privacy and security, which always seems to be an interest of the FCC in protecting the rights of consumers? So these working group meetings began at the end of June, and they have met successively every month. They met in June, they met in July, they met in August, and there's another set of 3 meetings next week at the end of September. The overall target is June 2024 for the overall Future TV initiative to make recommendations to the FCC and say, here's what the industry thinks, here's where we agree, here's where we don't agree. Do your job, government, and slice the baby in half and tell us what's reasonable for moving forward. So just my last slides here are more or less editorializing about why are we doing this? What is the ATSC 3 transition? And what does the transition mean? Well, I think we all believe, if you look far enough out, that this is indeed a transition, which means we're going from one state to another state. We're getting off the biplane and getting on the rocket ship, and having one foot on each is not something we want to do. And that's a very easy thing to say. It's always been easy to say ATSC 3 works a lot better than ATSC 1, but the transition between the two so that you can actually make that jump is extremely difficult and challenging, and we know that. But eventually, ATSC 1, we believe, is a competitive liability because of the spectrum penalty that we pay. Other media don't have that kind of penalty to worry about. But the worst thing that could happen is that we end up in the middle and have to be repeating signals on 2 different platforms forever for no good reason. So that's kind of the long view. It's hard to see the end of that race right now, but that's my editorializing, not it's not an NAB policy or anything, but that's how we see the future. And that's it for me. I know I ran a little long, but
no, perfect. But I do want to go to the meeting chat, and if the folks who inputted the message want to chime in, that's good as well. So the first one, is from Hal. I don't understand it. FWIW Cox will come into your DVR and erase anything older than 1 year. Is that's a current situation?
Cox is kind of assuming that's Cox Cable, and I don't know what they're going to do on their cable DVRs or their cloud DVRs. But as far as A3SA is concerned,
got it.
For over-the-air broadcasting and DVRs that are connected to over-the-air signals, A3SA has said that we will not impose any limits on recording, and we will not limit consumers' ability to do anything that they can do today with ATSC 1. They'll be able to do with ATSC 3. So that's a private contract between ATSC3 and broadcast networks, but I have no reason to disbelieve them that they're not going to do that, and that's what they're saying publicly.
Okay, thanks. Frank, go to you. For the future of cell phones with next gen TV, what UHF channels are available, or are some VHF which is not expected to be practical?
Yeah, for future cell phones with next gen TV, I think high VHF is UHF, yes. High VHF, aspirational, low VHF, not gonna work. You just physically can't have an antenna of the size that you need for low, channels 2 to 6 reception in a cell phone. Now there'll be, those frequencies are available, and the assumption that next gen TV is going to be in cell phones is just that, an assumption. Marketplace is not kind to broadcasters typically in terms of getting broadcast signals into their devices, at least so far, and they don't have to do that. But it can be done. Sinclair has the Mark I phone. They've shown it can be done. It probably will be done first in India, which is where a lot of attention is going for ATSC3, going into UHF spectrum in India for both cell phone overload and for broadcast traffic in India. The US is much harder, and you have to get through the mobile networks to say, yeah, I'll put an ATSC3 chip in the phone, and not only will I put it in the phone, but I'll turn it on. And their argument so far has been, well, how much are you going to pay me to do that? But there's practical concern is UHF will work great. VHF will work probably, and low VHF is going to be very, very challenging in a form factor of a cell phone. The days of recording your favorite TV show are coming to an end. Well, hopefully not. That is not the plan. A3SA says no, we're not going to do that. You can do anything you can do in ATSC1, you can do in ATSC3. I suppose time will tell.
Okay, William, you got a question there? I'll let you speak for yourself.
Yeah, hi. The question is there going to be apps that each individual station will put out to be able to let consumers get the TV over their phone, even though the phones aren't going to get the chips?
Well, that's one way to do it. I mean, and stations do that now. At least if you have the rights for the programming to go over the internet, you can make your own app for doing that, and you could make an app, a broadcast app that would allow doing that over the internet, over the cellular network, to send internet programming. It wouldn't be coming over the broadcast UHF or VHF spectrum, but and that's not really an ATSC3 thing. That's internet TV, and the regulations that go along with the internet. So I wouldn't look for ATSC3 to be in an iPhone or an Android device anytime soon, but the ability to do an app, just as you do apps now for iPhones, Androids, tablets, desktops, is certainly going to be available for ATSC3 content.
Yeah, what about for the return channel? It's like I'm watching TV and I want to buy the sweater. How do I do that? Are they developing that type of thing for me to, because everybody's a multi-device person these days.
Yeah, and right now the assumption is that to do an interactive application needing a return channel, that you would use the phones were, a phone's return channel or a device that was outfitted with an LTE or a 5G modem for doing that return channel. I mean, it's not impossible that broadcasters could develop their own return channel network, but the economics of doing that are pretty daunting. So there are hooks in place to be able to do return channel kind of stuff with through Wi-Fi or through mobile networks, but that is in terms of doing contracts with Verizon or AT&T or whoever, that's yet to be realized by anyone.
Okay,
So-
Dave Bialik has got a question. We're running out of time. Sorry, guys. Just trying to move along. Dave Bialik.
Yeah, Lynn, what's the status of what Mark Aiken's been talking about by streaming audio with ATSC 3 alongside the television channels and so forth?
Yeah, they've been working, and they're using the Digital Radio Mondiale framework for, and they are proposing using the Digital Radio Mondiale framework for ATSC 3. That's coming into the ATSC standardization committee now. I'm not sure they've actually put the new project proposal together, but they are planning to get that standardized through ATSC for a way to do many audio programs. It's not real, people call it radio over ATSC 3. And I suppose it is because you could do hundreds of channels, but hard to say whether that's the ultimate endpoint for that technology. But Sinclair specifically and One Media are proposing that for standardization.
Okay, I just want to, sorry, I got to cut short because we're going to end in about a minute. Want to welcome Richard from South Bend, was there a few weeks ago. Hal, welcome from Tucson. And I'm going to be the one. I want to throw I need a very quick answer from you here. I just am interested what is the most unique use of ATSC3 that you've seen so far since deployment? Has anybody really gotten something that is a wow factor going?
I think the most interesting thing is what's going on in Florida, where there is a IP channel. It's coming over the internet, but it uses the ATSC3 framework. So you go to the program guide for ATSC3, and one of the channels is on there. It looks like like an over-the-air channel. It smells like an over-the-air channel, but it is actually being delivered over the internet. So this is a way that over-the-air broadcasters who have run out of spectrum on ATSC3 can seamlessly integrate other programming that is actually being streamed over the internet to a smart TV in a way that it looks like the broadcast offering is much bigger than it actually is. And I think that has a lot of legs. So that's called they generically call that IP channel programming. And I'm going to forget which city it's happening in Florida. I think it's Miami, but I'm not entirely sure. There was a paper about it at the ATSC or at the NAB show from Gray TV.
All right, great. We're a little over time here. Sorry, I'm cutting people off, but I really want to thank Lynn Claudy for his presentation today. We could stay on probably another hour and pick your brain there, but we're not going to because we're hungry and it's dinner time. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and pass the word around about our Ennis workshop, because that's going to be big, and the more people there, the better. Hope to see some of you folks at NAB New York in October. Those from out of town, thanks for joining in. You guys are always welcome. Thanks again to everybody, and it's dinner time. So Lynn, thanks again, and everybody have a good night.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. Please remember to subscribe to SBE 15 New York City.